Go to cooking on the hob. Okay, so the hob, okay, is this bit at the top. Okay, the bit on the top of your cooker. Okay, the hob. Okay, now it could be a gas hob like these flaming ones, or it could be this kind of electric ring. And there are many different types of hobs. There are also these modern induction hobs that look a bit different. But basically, the heating area on top, okay, of your cooker, that's known as a hob. Americans sometimes call them burners as well, so you might hear them called burners as well. Okay, so as always, there are many different ways we can cook on the hob, of course, things like boiling or simmering. Now, by the way, these terms are often used the same in casual situations. People often say boil and simmer to mean the same, even though there is a big difference. So yeah, boiling is, of course, something like this, where you bring it to the boil and it bubbles. Okay, and I've just said this little phrase, bring to the boil. Bring to the boil is very common in recipes and instructions. Bring to the boil means basically it's cold or not boiling, okay, and you heat it up until it boils. So bring to the boil basically means heat up until it's bubbling, okay, like that. And then usually it'll say bring to the boil, then simmer. So boil means very active, boiling, lots of energy, and simmer is lots of small bubbles, so boiling gently. So people often say stuff like that. Yeah. So boiling and simmering, okay, similar terms, but slightly different, okay, and lots of people in casual cookery use boiling to mean simmering. Okay, so just be aware that people sometimes confuse the terms. Okay, bring to the boil and simmer is a very, very common recipe instruction. Okay, steaming, of course, is to cook things with steam. Shallow frying, or often simply called frying, is something like this. Often confused with sautéing, and I'll just say that the difference, most people just say frying. Okay, a chef will usually distinguish the difference, but the basic difference is sauté is cut into small pieces and uses less oil, and the technical difference when we talk about frying or shallow frying, that's usually in larger pieces and usually uses more oil. But don't worry too much about the difference, because often people in casual day-to-day cookery use the term frying instead of sautéing anyway, so don't panic about that one. Deep frying, of course, is like the way we make fish and chips, or like the way you make tempura. That's deep frying. Stir frying is, of course, when we move things around a lot more. Okay, yeah, and that's very much important. It's about the moving of the food as well. Okay, and again, the heat matters in the difference between all these cooking methods. You'll hear people talk about, and I just really want to mention this idea of boiling over. This is boiled over. Okay, so if something's boiled over, that means it's boiled so much that it's coming out of the pan. Boiling dry means it's boiled so much that all the water has evaporated and turned into steam, and it's now dry inside the pan and there's no liquid left. Boil dry means to boil until there's no liquid left and it is dry. Okay, that's a bad thing. These boiling over and boiling dry are both bad things. And you'll often hear terms like sticking or burning to the bottom of the pan when you're frying. So if something sticks to the bottom of the pan, that means it's not moving, you can't move it around, it's stuck. That's a term we often use. Maybe if you've got an old pan or something like that and it's, it needs a clean. And burning to the bottom of the pan basically means, okay, yeah, it's burnt, okay, and you've made a mistake and it's gone wrong. All right, and I just want to mention heat until smoking. You'll often hear this with like frying instructions. Heat the olive oil until smoking and then add the onions, for example. So when we heat oil or fat until smoking, it doesn't mean until it's burning and there's smoke. It just means until you can see a little bit of smoke or steam coming off the pan. Okay, it's a very common instruction. Braising. Now you often hear this. This is a bit of a confusing term for many people, to braise. Braise just means you saute it or fry it first until brown, and then you steam it, and then you add liquid. You can actually saute. You can actually braise in the oven as well, but it's a combination of dry and wet cooking methods. Basically, it's a combination of dry and wet. Okay, is when we talk about braising. Stewing. Okay, now again, stewing is when we cook in a broth or we cook in a sort of it's again a sort of a very slow cooker will stew, and we'll often stew things on top. Lots of boiling and simmering involved in stewing as well. Right, let's move on. Awesome work, guys. I hope that's useful to you. Let's move on and go to oven cooking. Okay, so oven cooking is cooking in the oven. Now, there are two big types of oven cooking, roasting and baking. Okay, roast versus baking. So, two very commonly confused terms, and it's easy to confuse them, and the difference between them is a little bit confusing. So, baking is used to talk about dry oven cooking, but it's usually something that's got a dough or a mix, something that's solid, like you bake a pie, you bake lasagna, you bake potatoes. So, again, it's different. You can have baked potatoes and roast potatoes, and the dishes are entirely different. And I think the potato example is quite a good one, so I'll come back to that. So roasting is used for wet or moist oven cooking, usually involving oil or fat to cook it. Okay, so and it's usually we talk about meat is roasted. Okay, stuff like that. So we roast meat. Okay, so the exception to this is fish. Okay, weirdly enough, okay, fish isn't roasted; it's baked, even though it's cooked in the same method as roasting, generally using oil or fat. As well, but it doesn't matter. We say baking for fish, but don't worry too much. But the basic difference is what type of thing you're cooking. You roast meat, and if it involves oil or fat, okay, that kind of thing, we say roasting. You don't bake a chicken. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, that kind of thing. But an interesting difference is a roast potato and a baked potato. A baked potato is cooked completely dry, okay, until the skin goes hard, and is usually cooked whole. Okay, so that's kind of a dry cooked potato. A roast potato is cut up, okay, and is roasted in kind of usually goose fat or olive oil or something. So you roast it in hot oil, okay, and that's what makes it crispy on the outside, and the taste is very different. So yeah, so roasting uses fat or oil and comes from the traditional method of spit roasting. So when you turn something, cook over a fire, when you cook meat over a fire, that's the beginning of where roasting comes from. We roast meats, okay, such as joints. So a joint is a cut of meat, okay. So for example, a leg of lamb, okay, or maybe it's pork shoulder, okay. So a joint is a cut of meat, a part of meat, or a whole chicken, okay, or a turkey like this one here, okay. So this kind of thing, that's a roast. That's kind of thing. But we might roast peppers or potatoes, whatever. And inside meat that we roast, we often put stuffing. So when we talk about stuffing, okay, stuffing is like usually sausage meat and herbs, garlic, maybe something like bacon. We cook it all beforehand, and then we put it inside the chicken or the turkey. So often people will put it right up inside the chicken or turkey, or you put it under the skin, and it basically adds moisture, it adds flavor, okay, and stuff like that in the roasting process. You'll hear the term stuffing used to talk about sausage meat or and various other ingredients made to make a stuffing. The other term I want to mention is roasties. Okay, so often called roasties. I mentioned it earlier. Roast potatoes. It's just one of the most popular Western dishes with your roast dinner. Okay, is your roasties or your roast potatoes. All right, so baking is generally referred to this more dry food, such as making bread, cakes, pies, and pastry. Okay, stuff like that. And this could be either sweet pies or savory pies, like a meat pie, a Cornish pasty, stuff like that. Those are baked. Okay, and things like pizzas that are bready, or lasagna, tuna pasta, dauphinoise potatoes, these kind of things that are kind of solid mixtures that are cooked together, rather than something that is individually cooked in fat or oil. All right, other forms of oven cooking, as I said before, braising, okay, and often when we talk about oven braising, it's like a combination of roasting in fat and steaming. Okay, so you might hear that term used occasionally, though it's more correctly used for on the hob. And then again, there's casseroles or stews, which can also be cooked in the oven, in a pot, okay, or a crock pot or something like that.